Now, women with ME tend to have more symptoms and co-occurring conditions than men, according to initial results from the world's largest study of the disease. Experts from the University of Edinburgh say that gaining a better understanding of how ME affects people is the first step to developing effective treatment options. Well, let's speak now to Sonya Chowdhury, who's Chief Executive of Action for ME and Chair of the Management Group of the study. And we're also joined by Pippa Stacey, who has ME and took part in the study. Good afternoon to both of you, and thank you for your time. Sonya, first of all, perhaps you could start by telling us a little more about what you're looking at here.
So the DNA study is looking at the differences between the DNA of people with ME, sometimes called chronic fatigue syndrome, and healthy controls, to look at the biological, ideally to identify the biological causes of the illness, which we hope will then go on and enable treatments to be developed. This study that you're talking about today, the paper we've just published, is looking at the responses to the questionnaire that all of our participants complete to be part of the study. Some then go on to provide DNA, and we analyse the data from the first 17,000 questionnaires.
Right, and you have found that, as expected, women tend to have more symptoms.
Yes, that's correct. We expected to see that more women would take part in the study, and over 83% of our study participants in that first 17,000 were women. And the data suggests that women experience more severe symptoms that increase, and this increases with age, and if they've had ME for more than 10 years. We also found that they experienced other common sort of co-occurring illnesses aside from ME than men did.
OK, we'll come back to you in just a second, but Pippa, perhaps you could tell us your experience with ME.
Yeah, so I started getting the symptoms of ME when I was about 14 years old. But like many people, I had the experience of going to the doctor over and over again, trying to explain all of these horrible things I was experiencing. But I'd always be told, oh, there's nothing wrong, maybe it's just stress or hormones. And it wasn't until I was 19 when I had quite a serious relapse that it was finally taken seriously. So it took a good long while to get that diagnosis, and that's the case for many other people. And my experience since then has fluctuated quite a lot, but I am one of the lucky ones who's experienced improvement, which is something I'm incredibly grateful for.
So how does it affect you at the moment?
The main things for me are a kind of really disabling fatigue. It's not the same thing as everyday tiredness or exhaustion that non-disabled people might experience. It's a really unique sensation in itself, and it's quite difficult to describe. There's also things like pain and sensory overload. There's post-exertional malaise, which basically means I'll do something at one point in time, but then the impact of that will happen at a delayed time period. So there'll be like an onslaught of symptoms. Right. And it's just essentially a load of really disabling symptoms. So it's quite an interesting thing to manage.
Yeah, and so much so that you have to use a wheelchair.
Yeah, that's right. It has helped me massively, just learning to accept mobility aids and not seeing it as a tragedy, because using mobility aids is actually one of the things that has helped me to manage my condition more than anything. So my ability to stand and walk is very limited, but thanks to using a wheelchair, I can still get out and about, which again is something I'm grateful for, because not everybody is able to do that.
And what are you hoping comes out of this study?
I just think the more in-depth information we have about ME, the easier it's going to be for researchers to identify targeted treatments. That's one of the things I really feel is lacking at the minute. And there's only, all of us do everything we can to help ourselves, but there's only so much we can do until we have that better understanding. So even just knowing that studies of this scale, like Decode ME, are taking place, it's just incredible, and I can't wait to see what else comes out of it.
Pippa, thank you very much for sharing all of that. Sonya, what do we know about ME then? Because obviously, Pippa's experience says a lot, doesn't it? Struggle to get it taken seriously initially, but obviously it's taken more seriously these days. Do we know even what might have caused it?
We don't. There has been research in the past, but it's been very limited, and we certainly haven't seen the level of funding that other disease areas get. A lot of the studies are on smaller numbers and haven't been replicated. So we've got lots of clues about what might be going on in lots of the body's systems, the immune system, the autonomic system, etc. But we haven't had anything conclusive. And what we do know from other illness areas is that we need big data, and that's what this the Decode ME study is very much focused on. We also are seeing, and there's research that's indicating that around 50% of the 2.1 million people in the UK with long COVID have symptoms that directly mirror ME. And so what we originally thought... Yes, and for many people, not all, but many people can cite a virus that they had that, and then ME followed. So that was the trigger. And obviously, we are very aware of COVID as a virus. So we were unsurprised, sadly, to hear of the number of people that are now experiencing what's called long COVID, but also then to see research that indicates around half of those have ME-like symptoms. So we're talking potentially about 1.3 million people upwards that are having that have ME or ME-like symptoms.
Sonya, thank you very much indeed. That's Sonya Chowdhury, who's Chief Executive of Action for ME. And we also heard from Pippa Stacey, who has ME.